It wasn't originally my idea to focus on sports nutrition. I always loved sport. I played sport growing up. I mean, that was when I said to myself, one day I would work in sports nutrition and I want to work with the Springboks. And it just so happened, ironically, that at my 21st, I got to meet Brian Urbana and I told him one day I'm going to work with the Springboks. When you are exposed to things or when you experience things in your own personal life, it shapes how you interact with other people, because maybe they do want somebody that's very strict, that's very military style. And my approach is very gentle, very understanding. There's some people, I just had a discussion with gym goers who go to the gym 3 to 5 times a week consistently and still don't get results. It really comes down to there's a missing link, and it's your nutrition. Even a glass, just one glass of milk, if you're a person that can tolerate milk, one glass gives you 8 grams of protein. And we assume that when you get to an elite level, you are on the elite level with everything. But I've dealt with lots of athletes that have never understood the foundations of nutrition because they've never been exposed to it. And then after you win, it starts again. And even with camps, like after that tournament, then you have your break, you come back into camp, and it's a restart. So it's a really high pressure environment. It's something that if you don't take care of yourself, then you won't be able to do the best of your ability as well. I will say 2019, I was very fit then. That was like my era of running 4 minutes 20 a kilometer. I would be that person that would wake up super early and go and train because of yoga. That I always partook in yoga since varsity, watching it on YouTube and just really going to classes, joining in on classes. Have my moments where I actually just want to be in silence and I want to be alone.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Zen Now, the space where we explore what it takes to perform, evolve, and show up with purpose. Today I have the honor of sitting down with someone whose journey speaks volumes, not just about performance nutrition, but also about breaking barriers and leading with intention. Zeenat Simjee was the first ever dietitian appointed to the South African national rugby team. She's also a 2-time Rugby World Cup winning team member, and even more importantly, she's the first woman of color to hold a position in a space that hasn't always looked like her. The conversation means a lot to me personally, and I know it will inspire you too. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kishen. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome. You're such an inspiration. It's an honor for me to have you on the podcast as well.
I really appreciate that. I know sometimes it does feel a bit strange to hear these things about yourself because you don't take the time to sit back and look at what you have overcome and how far you've come along, because sometimes you're always just looking at the future or trying to just stay afloat,
Yeah. No, I get that. So Zeenat, can you take us back to where the first interest sparked for you for food and the wellness side of it, and eventually transitioning into sports nutrition?
Well, that depends how far back, because I think even as a kid, coming from an Indian background, you don't really get much exposure to many career routes. And at that time, when I was a teenager growing up, I really wanted to be in medicine, but I shadowed a dietitian. I think this was about 2008. Yeah, that just gives away how old I am. And it was actually the dietitian that worked very closely to the cardiothoracic surgeon I wanted to initially shadow. But I wasn't a medical student, I was still in high school, so I couldn't shadow him, obviously. And he said, he told my mom because she did the whole arrangement for me. And he said to her, he should shadow my right-hand woman. She's a dietitian and she works in the hospital.
Okay.
So I actually shadowed at Mill Park Hospital, and I shadowed this dietitian just as a means to get through a task that was part of life orientation. But during that
Okay.
period, it was really when I got introduced to nutrition and what dietetics is really about. Obviously, it's not a degree or a career that many people understand, and I don't think people speak about it enough. And this is something that was new to me. Obviously, I had known that my mom had seen a dietitian, and a lot of people think dietitians are just about weight loss, but that experience, obviously
Yeah.
working in an emergency hospital, got thinking about this could be something that I could go into. And when I was in grade 11, I applied for it because obviously you need to use your grade 11 results.
Yes. Yes.
And eventually, in time, it wasn't originally my idea to focus on sports nutrition. I always loved sport. I played sport growing up. Obviously, it was a bonding moment with my dad, and I just had an affinity towards sport. But I didn't think that I would go into sport until I was in my final year and I got introduced to sports nutrition. Well, it was actually third year we got introduced to sports nutrition, but in my final year we had to do a practical. And I was very shy in university. I don't think I spoke to as many people. And during that time, I didn't have such a great experience with the group presentation. So later on, the lecturer allowed me to do it on my
Okay.
own and to submit a different assignment. And obviously, that deep dive and the exploration into sports nutrition really sparked something for me. And it happened to be the same year that I turned 21. So I mean,
Oh.
that was when I said to myself, one day I would work in sports nutrition and I want to work with the Springboks. And it just so
Okay.
happened, ironically, that at my 21st, I got to meet Brian Urbana and I told him one day I'm going to work with the Springboks. And I suppose eventually, I knew that I needed to study sports nutrition and I needed to further my undergraduate, which was in dietetics. And the same lecturer that oversaw sports nutrition at Stellenbosch, she also had a postdoctoral degree in sports nutrition. Through the IOC, she also did her postgraduate diploma, and obviously through the university, she did her master's and her PhD. But she was the person that wrote my recommendation letter for the IOC, and then obviously, there's so much to go into, but really that
Yeah.
was the start of nutrition career, which is over 10 years ago because I am practicing for quite some time now. But yeah, that's really how
Yeah.
it emerged, and ever since then, I don't think I'll ever look back.
Yeah. I think there's moments in time when you know your calling comes along, and I think your moment was when you were shadowing uh, the dietitian at was it Molpark, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, at Moorpark, yes. So that's
Yes,
originally
yes,
how I
Molpark.
got
Yeah, yeah,
exposed to
yeah, yeah.
dietetics. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. And thankfully also, like, I mean, it was kind of your professor also then to, let you do that exam again, knowing that, you had a challenge with public speaking at that point. So it was kind of him actually to do that. Not many professors or lecturers allow you to do that.
I think that's also, I mean, there are certain people along your life that you meet and you're very
Mm.
grateful to them. I know in that specific group presentation, some experiences just stick with you. And obviously, because you're not a
Yeah.
vocal person, and having someone actually listen to you and understand you before making their own conclusion, that was something quite amazing that I experienced with quite a few lecturers, not all. And obviously, dietetics is not it's not as large as your other courses. So you're a very
Yeah.
small group, and you get to really get a chance to bond with certain lecturers. And I think that's really why, I mean, it's for me one of the pivoting moments, but it really arose from an empathetic lecturer, empathetic person. And it's also why I am the
Hmm.
way that I am as well. I mean, it's also shaped how you experience things, the people's experiences towards you, or how they interact with you. Later on, they show you how you should show up for other people.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100% there. It's how we want to be treated the same way we would treat somebody else.
Exactly. Definitely,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen yesterday's. Speaking of Brian Habana, I saw him yesterday on Soccer Aid. Playing at Old Trafford for
Mhm.
that cause. It took me back to when he was playing for the Springboks as well, and Springboks, and just how influential he was to the sport, for South
Mhm.
Africa. It was awesome. I mean, he's gone a bit, on the chain side. I won't use the word, but he's still an athlete at the end of the day. And yeah, it was good to see him like representing South Africa on that stage.
Mhm. Definitely. I think, if I think of when I was younger, you definitely see that more people of color resonate with people of color, and that's the representation,
Mm,
because you see somebody there and you think, I would like to be that person. So, I mean, that time, obviously, I'm talking about prior to 2010 and going into early 2010, we didn't have the many people of color in the Springboks. I mean, there definitely
yeah,
were a few, but to have someone of his accolade representing it, I think of those times, he was maybe the Cheslin Colby of those times,
yeah,
and
yeah,
or maybe the Sia Kolisi of those times. I mean, Sia did play with
mm,
Brian, but he was quite a junior, and I mean, that's
yeah,
also, for him to continue even after your career with the Springboks and still be doing incredible
mm,
things, just shows you that you yourself, you're a brand. And I mean, it's a single brand doesn't make an individual. It's what they make of it. And if they continue
yeah,
on that, it really means a lot to other people who are onlooking. And I think Brian's one of those people.
yeah. I think the first influential person okay, I'm gonna reveal my age now is Chester Williams, going back to '95.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I was actually 3 at that time. So I know
I
everyone
was, I
knows.
was,
Well, I know him, but I didn't really, I wasn't really a big
yeah,
fan because I
I
was
was,
just an infant, a toddler.
yeah, I was 10 at the time, so I understood a little bit of it, of the context. But yeah, that's going back to the first, influential person that we've seen of color in actually SA rugby. And like you
Mhm.
said, it's when you see those representations, it's just about, hey, I can be there. I can do that as well. And then you start to then manifest that into the universe to start to get to that point. And sometimes it goes our way, and sometimes it doesn't. But we do have an inkling to represent in some form, if you get
Mhm.
what I'm saying.
Definitely. And sometimes I feel that, and I also get it from some people that will approach me. And I mean, I've even had it once where a gentleman said to me that his daughter looks up to me, and purely for the fact that I am an Indian woman in sport, and she partakes in sports, but she also never realized that you can be where I'm at, because she can see
Yeah,
that there's a person of color, and specifically an Indian person. Because I mean, I wasn't the only Indian person when I joined the Springboks. I was also Tanu, and Tanu is really
okay,
so, she's another example of growing beyond just one role. She's also now at a big soccer club abroad. And I mean, this is something that really, I mean, when that gentleman told me about what his daughter said, at that time, it was just into my second year working with the national side, and you don't realize it because you don't hear these things, and nobody ever, I mean,
Yeah.
people don't want to write articles that are positive about, representation or female being in this space, or, I mean, people don't really like to uplift other people, I think. So it's really good that somebody, an onlooker, sees this and can share that even when you don't realize it, you're inspiring somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Role models. We need we need
Yes,
good, authentic role models to look up to, so that, yeah, we're not playing the race card or anything. It's just somebody that you can resonate with, basically,
definitely,
in terms of
definitely.
your cultural upbringings, your values, your morals. Somebody that you can um, really resonate with on that form from a deeper level. Hence why we also looked up to. I mean, I support all South African teams in South Africa, and some of my colleagues or friends are more on like, oh, they other support Australia, India, whatever it is. But for myself, it's so deeply rooted within me that I wanted to represent South Africa one day in some form of way. It never happened,
Mm,
for whatever reason. But that representation is there. You feel something when you see your brothers and sisters who within South Africa, representing that. I have a friend now from our local community who's now the number one table tennis player in South Africa. So it's good to
wow.
see, your friends representing on a global stage. I mean, I think he went to the Commonwealth Games as well, did well there, and he's also now paving the way for the next generation to say, "Hey, I can also do it," because they see somebody that they resonate with, and like what you've done. And that little girl, she sees representation and she can resonate with you in that way, and then that
Mhm.
starts to get her wheel going, and she gets to a nice place where when she gets there, she can look upon, hey, Zeenat was my role model. And I think that's what's the amazing takeaway from your journey.
Yeah, I definitely do agree. I mean, I looking back when I was younger, especially just in my career, having someone just to also reach out to as like a mentor is not always
Mhm.
something that you could just find readily available. I mean, back then we didn't have as much access to the internet and
Mm.
learning about things. You only really saw things if there was maybe somebody on a a news channel or on the radio, and or maybe they came to your school and they did a talk, because back then
Yeah,
it was like when people came and they
assembly
did
time.
a talk about their career. Yeah, at assembly. Exactly. And I think now it's changed so much because you've got social media and you don't actually need um, maybe going the route of a media route or whatever it may be. Somebody can still
Mhm.
find access to you, whether it be on LinkedIn to reach out for mentorship or guidance, or just if you are someone
Yeah,
who silently wants inspiration.
yeah, no, 100%. I used to love those days, actually, when everybody gets together in that assembly area, and there's a whole movement, there's noise, there's everything, and eventually somebody comes up, and sometimes it's not somebody that you want to see, but you're standing in the hot sun, waiting when it's just over. But when you get influential people coming over, and it resonates, not everybody's going to resonate with it, but sometimes some people do, and I think that's what's the good thing about having those kind of interactions. Sometimes, yeah, social media and being on a digital platform, I think it removes some element of that feeling that you get when you see somebody or speak in person. The energy is probably not the same, if you
Mhm.
get what I'm saying. It's different, but it's the access is there now, much more at our fingertips compared to when, like you said, when we were growing up.
Definitely. And I still think, I do school talks, and I went to a school to do, but this is a little bit different because it's organized for the purpose of supporting and empowering young athletes to consider looking
Hmm.
into how they look after their bodies and their choices around food, and especially to nurture themselves while they are aiming for a bigger sporting goal. And I think it's a little different now because they're in a hall and there is, I mean, I went to a primary school's capping and the setup and the layout was just incredible. I think it's I
Is it?
I've been to Springbok cappings that were not that grand. So I mean, I just think it's just so strange how things have changed and how times have changed as well. But it's also a great thing because you're you're getting schools that are more progressive than others, and you're getting
Mm.
principals who understand that children need positive influences. And because of social media, where they can be so impressionable, you want to introduce them to individuals that they should actually be getting,
Yeah.
in my circumstance, credible nutrition from, or people that they should be actually looking up to. That's not just perhaps about the lifestyle or the money chase, but more around your well-being, your lifestyle, your future, and understanding yourself, which I think is really
Yeah.
important because ultimately, no matter how much money somebody has or, what they appear to be like from an outside point of view, it's really got to do with your health, your mindset, your well-being at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
those are things that if you get children to start understanding how important mental health, physical health, and your choices and your
Mm.
mindset is is really powerful because it can have a knock-on effect in their life as well.
Yeah. 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 You make an important point there where I think the nutrition plays a huge part in your physical and mental well-being. It's not a topic of discussion that's spoken enough about in the adolescence years or younger years, where we try and introduce those kind of practices, healthy practices. Yeah, I mean, kids. They have metabolisms like Ferraris, so they're able to burn it off as quick as possible. Not when you get to your 30s and 40s, but if they can introduce those kind of practices early on, it just stems them a good a good stand in going forward in their later life, and then they don't have to also then struggle with all the chronic illnesses and all those kind of ailments that come after that, given that how our parents and previous generations have, you know, taken care of themselves. Now we're in the middle of that spectrum where, yeah, we had good, I think, good nutrition habits, but not enough to elevate your levels in terms of performance output, because we didn't have the understanding. There was no
But not
knowledge
just that.
that was passed on to us.
I think
We had to
now,
learn everything ourselves.
definitely, but I also think now, in comparison to when we were younger, uh, there are fewer people that are being active. The sedentary lifestyles are it's so common for kids to rather have screen time rather than to be active.
Mm,
Also, your
yeah,
high
yeah.
energy foods and your high, I would say high saturated fat items are more readily available. I mean, there are more kids that are opting to have energy drinks when they don't understand it and to be having fast foods more often than when we were younger. And the rate of childhood obesity is actually rapidly inclining, it's rapidly increasing in South Africa as well. And if you are
Mhm.
what the literature says, oftentimes children that are overweight become overweight adolescents, and those adolescents become overweight adults. And it's so difficult that
Mhm.
once you're an adult to do all these habit changes, and it comes down to a game mindset. A lot of people just think, well, I've always been this way, so why do I need to make a change? And I get that often. Sometimes with some people, they
Yeah.
think, oh, but I've always been doing it this way. So why do I really need to change it? I'm just living a good life. And I've even had, someone once say, I'm not here for a long time, I'm here for a good time. So, it comes back to when you set strong foundations already from a kid, you never know how that
That's
translates. I
awesome.
mean, if I think of myself, if I think about I never really, I wasn't an active kid for sports. Like I just played with my cousins, my siblings, and then it was only when I went
Mm.
to a school that actually made it compulsory for you to take up a sport each term. Um,
Yeah.
that was really when I started playing team sports. And I think also it's just so different now how things have evolved, and the people that have the biggest say on the future of a child is their parents. But oftentimes, the parents who come from our generation or before that think, oh, well, but nutrition wasn't as important for me, or it wasn't anything that I cared about. So why should I do it for my kid? Or why should I look for
Mm.
it from the right individual? Again, coming back to social media, there's so much
Right, right,
noise
right.
around when it comes to health and what you should be doing. And there's also this pressure because people post these 5 o'clock, 5 a.m. club type of things and their routines. And then you sit there developing a guilt if you're not a part of that club. But perhaps that's not a route that
Yeah.
works for you. And maybe fewer hours of sleep makes you crankier, makes you less productive. And maybe the 5 a.m. club is not for you, but it's what's being pushed on social media, just as an example. And
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of going to the right individual, whether it be psychologists, whether it be, dietitians, a doctor that's specialized in maybe functional medicine and health, where they're not just giving you a temporary intervention to relieve a symptom, but like looking at the bigger picture. People don't always do that. They think, oh, well, why do I need to
Mm.
pay for this when I can just Google it? Or I can just go onto TikTok and find information. So I think, to keep the conversation alive is really important. And also to have, like your podcast where you're talking about these things. So when people stumble across this, they're seeing that there are better individuals to be getting information from, and they're also getting
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to learn about all the different people, their personalities, because I can say there are,
Yeah.
speaking from dietetics personally, there are lots of dietitians. My area of focus is sports nutrition and also wellness, and corporate wellness is one of it. And because I've worked so much with athletes, I do understand how athletes think, how they do things, and I have also a better way of approaching, a more refined way of approaching things in comparison to previously when I didn't work with athletes. People also get to see the type of personalities between different healthcare professionals.
Yeah.
And, for me, being someone that I may not have gone to the highest levels, I think perhaps provincial trials was probably
What
the
do you
highest
mean?
I ever went to.
What do you mean? You've got
And
to the
didn't
highest level.
really
You do
didn't get selected for the provincial
You're
team,
selling
but that's
yourself
okay.
short, Zeenat. No.
But I mean, I was
No, you're
also a
selling yourself
young
short,
athlete.
Zeenat.
I mean, I think also the empathy part. It comes back to what I just said in the beginning. When
Mm.
you are exposed to things or when you experience things in your own personal life, it shapes how you interact with other people. So people can also learn that, sometimes I'm not the best fit for the next person because maybe they do want somebody that's very strict, that's very military
Yeah.
style, that maybe is forces you have to do this, you must, don't do that. And my approach is very gentle, very
Yeah.
understanding. And things like this, like platform like this, gets people to see the personalities behind the professions, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, 100%. Um, it's important, like you said, to have some form of foundational understanding, because not one size doesn't fit all. We all have a
Mm.
different body, different metabolism, different diet. Allergies play a huge part of that as well. So we can't all just like take the same
Mhm.
thing because it doesn't work. So I myself know when I go out for a ride or a cycle, I know I take a bottle of water and an electrolyte with me, because I know I need that to keep myself going, because otherwise I fatigue. And then I also carry with me a banana or a power bar, a protein bar with me. So when I'm resting, I know I'm rejuvenating myself. But that only comes from understanding and going through what works for you. If that doesn't work for you, you try something else. But hence why practitioners like yourself are important to help us understand that not one size fits all, and we need to really understand and listen to our bodies, because it can be a detriment to you to go down the wrong path, and then you start consuming all, like you said, TikTok and social media. It's a cesspool of information right now, and the type of information we're getting, because like you said, 5 a.m. club. Yeah, some people are morning people, some people are evening people, and some people are midday people. So it just depends what you're trying to, or you need to stay true to yourself basically, and not fall down
Mm.
that rabbit hole of just trying to fit in, because I think that's also where identity and your self-value or worth comes in, because you feel like you're being isolated now because you're not part of the club that's waking up at, well, now it's 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. I don't know. Yeah. But,
I mean, you
and
know,
all of those things. Um,
it comes, it really comes back to you need to speak to the right person. You need to speak to the right healthcare professional to guide you. Because I mean, even when it comes to maybe you could be benefiting more from a sleep hygiene perspective if you have a routine in place. And maybe the 5 a.m. could work for you, but maybe you're not also speaking to the right people to advise you. And even when it comes to, I mean,
mm,
I'm so happy that you cycle, but keeping moving, there's some people, I mean, I just had a discussion with gym goers who go to the gym 3 to 5 times a week consistently and still don't get results. And it really comes down to there's
yeah,
a missing link, and it's your nutrition. But you think what you are doing currently is
yeah,
okay, and you haven't taken the but or the time to go to the right professional to actually help you live your full potential, to guide you, and to show you what you're actually supposed to be doing. I mean, for example, with you, you could have come to me and said, I'm going to go for a 3 hour cycle, and I'm going to say to you, one banana and your bar is absolutely not enough to get the best out of your performance. And if you want to
mm,
be able to cycle harder, go faster, feel less sore after your run and I'm sorry, your cycle, and you want to understand your body better, sometimes it's not just about trial and error and the frustration behind it. There can be an individual who is an expert in that if you reached out to them, they can
mm,
advise you, give you an approach that you trial and you feedback and refine it. And that's how you modify, your performance. You could be, doing greater things, but because you just haven't made a decision internally to go to the right person, it could result in holding you back. And this is why, for me personally, with my
yeah,
brand, it's why my tagline is feel with purpose, live your potential. Because a lot of people are just eating to fill their stomachs. I'm hungry, I'm just going to have whatever. Whatever's nearby. There's no
yeah,
thought behind it because they don't have the exposure. And because of that, it can affect so many things in their bodies. And like you said, nutrition also plays a role with mental health and with hormones and your body composition. There's just so much. And it still baffles me till this day that
yeah,
a lot of people think that nutrition is just something that's, it's just food. But there's so much power behind food. And I mean,
mm,
for me, I remember once I was speaking to, it was 2019, and my granny was still alive at that time. And I was speaking to my granny and I was telling her about how in literature they've proven that turmeric, so bori, the yellow spice that Indian people love to
Yes,
cook
yes, yes.
with, they've
Yeah, 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 yeah.
proven
Yeah, it's
turmeric,
like a staple
30
in our
grams
food.
but they've proven that 30 grams of turmeric a day can assist with reducing inflammation. And it's now in supplement forms. But it's been something that has been a part of people's cultures, for example, and it's things that you were perhaps doing and you never realized it if you were exposed to it. But also, if you knew the right amount and you knew why you were taking something or how to combine it with
Right.
another nutrient to enhance its absorption, what it can do. But people don't realize that that's a simple spice that you can literally, add to your foods.
Yeah.
But people feel the hype now because they hear of the supplement form. And it again comes back to, I mean, even with whey proteins or protein in itself, people think, oh, I need to take a whey protein supplement because I'm not going to get my protein demands. But a lot of people that I work with, a lot of my
Yeah.
clients, often when you analyze their dietary intake, they're not doing poorly with protein. And they just need guidance on the amounts and the frequency and how to make sure
Mm.
that they're getting the right amount and by just learning. And it's this thing of you just need to realize life is a continuous journey of learning in so many areas. And one of it is your body as well, because it's changing as you age, as you change factors like you challenge yourself, or maybe your stress load
Correct.
becomes more. I mean, you need to learn more as your life evolves. And I think, this is
Exactly.
just speaking about how passionate about nutrition I am,
I
but
know.
it's just one of the things that people don't realize that even a glass, just one glass of milk, if you're a person that can tolerate milk, one glass gives you 8 grams of protein. But when you're having different forms of dairy and different forms of protein, you're getting a variety. The quality of your nutrition really matters. And a supplement is not always going to give you
Yeah.
micronutrients or the satisfaction of enjoyment, because food is also about enjoyment. And imagine that where you can choose food, meet your nutritional requirements, and still get results. But people don't want to learn. They want to take the easier route out. And sometimes the easier route is
Yeah.
the more expensive route because you are trialing things and not getting results and spending all this money on maybe a pill, potion, supplement, whatever it may be. And
Yeah.
really, you just need to get the right professional, invest perhaps the rate of that and maybe follow-ups to learn things that are lifelong information that will benefit you.
Benefits. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's really something I think when even if we speak about the new craze now is gut health. But gut health has always been something that
Oh yeah.
dietitians always focused on. And it's now because the right person or the right influencer or I don't know, the right podcast host had a talk to somebody who was maybe specialized in gut health. And now it's all the
Yeah.
craze because of, again,
Craze.
social media. But it's always been something that dietetics has been focusing on, which is the importance of your gut. That's really
Yeah.
what dietetics is really just about the GI system and how all of that influences the
Okay.
body. I mean, now people talk about gut health. I
Yeah.
remember I had somebody tell me about the Netflix documentary last year, and they were talking about your microflora in your gut influences digestion, your moods, and everything. But this is something that we dietitians have already been exposed to the gut brain axis many years ago. And people are now talking about it because they got this information from Netflix. But you didn't realize that if had you gone and sought out a dietitian, for whatever reason, you don't really need to be diagnosed diagnosed with
No.
any condition to go and see a dietitian. I mean, I did say I'm in sports nutrition and corporate wellness and well-being, but there are dietitians that many dietitians we just focus on lifestyle and wellness and
Every day, yeah.
healthy eating habits for longevity in your life and better quality of life. And people think, oh, if I'm not overweight, I don't need to go see a dietitian.
Mm.
But it's
Yeah.
we're not really just there about weight loss.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break.
Yeah. Interesting you say one thing you said about milk is till to this day I still have that glass of milk. I tried. So when we moved to Canada, we tried to change our milk from regular milk to oat milk. And both my wife and I, we've been on that. I was on it for a couple of months, and I realized it made me feel heavy. It wasn't working for me, and I'm like, because over here everybody's the homogenization and the level of calcium that you, whatever it is. For myself, I felt I needed to go back to regular milk because that works for me. Because even though when I was growing up, that glass of milk, it was something that worked for me. And I said, no, I'm listening to myself right now. I will have that glass of milk. And I now drink regular milk because that works for me. It's not going to work for everybody else, yes. But I had to listen to my body. Because yeah, we try different things. There's no harm in trying different things to see where you can improve or what works for you. But I had to listen to myself. I had to go inwards and listen. Because otherwise I would have just kept, trying new different things and not going back to something that I know was beneficial to me.
And I mean, a few years ago, there was this whole, I would say, shift from people going away from cow's milk because they had all these beliefs about it. But I really do think that if you don't have a true lactose problem, so you don't have a
Issue.
lactase enzyme issue, and you can't tolerate lactose, it's really important to have the dairy because it's got the other micronutrients. I mean, we're not just referring to one nutrient when it comes to food. And there is a space for milk alternatives. I mean, I have people that have regular cow's milk, but when we make smoothies or when we add on into a base of some recipes, we will use oat milk or a milk alternative because of calories. So, I mean, there's a space, but they understand what they could be getting from a nutritional point of view from cow's milk
Yeah.
versus a milk alternative is quite different. There's a space for different foods. And I also have seen that so many people think, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. But that is based off of perhaps a specific group of individuals. So, I mean, if you have a lactose intolerance and you are somebody that can't be having it, these days they even have cow's milk where they have lactose-free cow's milk. You could still be getting in the micronutrients without it being
The
fortified. I
source.
mean,
Yeah.
almond milks are now fortified with all the micronutrients to make it close to cow's milk. But ultimately, if one glass of almond milk is going to give you 1 gram of protein, and one glass of cow's milk, whether it be fat free, low fat, or if you can have the full cream, it's going to give you 8 to 9 grams of protein, which, yes, in a bigger picture, because it's not that much, because a lot of people, it's dependent on your weight, how much protein you should be having. Some people, obviously men,
Correct.
women, different ages, have different daily requirements. But just the knowledge about foods and what they entail comes from learning about it. And sometimes people try things just because it's a craze and they don't actually know they should be having or they shouldn't be doing something, but they think that the craze is relevant to them. Whereas, the introduction of milk alternatives could have been relevant to people who truly had an issue with lactose, and they couldn't tolerate the cow's
Yeah.
milk. And I mean, regular people who could tolerate were just thinking, okay, well, now I don't need to be having it. And there is a thing called secondary lactase deficiency. So the fewer times you have any dairies that have lactose. So let's say I were to start cutting out dairy and cutting out lactose, but I am not a lactose intolerant person. My gut is so smart that
Person.
it
Yeah.
starts to reduce the amount of lactase enzyme. So that's the enzyme that basically cuts up the sugar lactose so that you can digest it. My body would reduce it. So when I do have lactose, I can be having an effect. I can be feeling symptoms because my body has now adapted to the fact that I don't give it a lot of lactose. And now, when I suddenly introduce a whole bunch, I can't break it down. My body doesn't know how to adapt and adjust to it. It happens often also with I've got a client that was vegetarian and eventually went the whole vegan route for a bit, went back to vegetarian because still wanted to be lacto ovo vegetarian. And when they ate meat again, they struggled because again, comes down to your body adapts. It's so resilient. The body is incredible, and you just really have to understand how to get the maximum out of it
Yeah.
and what not to do to actually, hold it back, right?
Yeah. How did you? So you made history with the Springboks, and and by being in that space. And I saw an interview actually. There was an online clip of you introducing them into post recovery practices. For me, at that moment, I was, okay, these guys are elite athletes. How come? How do they not understand how important it is for that process to happen after a training session or game or whatever? So you've come in and you've introduced those kind of practices into an elite sport level. And also, how did that? How how did you manifest that, or how did you manage that? Load for them, because let's be honest, they're quite big guys, right? They're pretty. They need quite a lot of sustenance to keep them going. How did you manage to create that program?
I will say, even in my interview when I first, went for my interview with SA Rugby, I did say that sports in South Africa is far behind the way that athlete management is overseas. So, I mean, you're in Canada, and I can tell you, I've attended a webinar where even in primary schools, so your foundational phase, nutrition is introduced to children. And when they partake in sport, the foundations are set and then they build. And that's really about what nutrition is. Now, unfortunately, in South Africa, we've got so many athletes that they come from, not everybody is exposed to resources, and your backgrounds are so different. I mean, for a lot of individuals that maybe come from a background where just getting food is really important. They don't really think about the details. They just think about filling and not fueling. And we assume that when you get to an elite level, you are on the elite level with everything. But I mean, I've dealt with lots of athletes that have never understood the foundations of nutrition because they've never been exposed to it, and they never thought to. I mean, it wasn't something. It comes down to your coaches too, and what your coaches speak about. If you're a coach that just speaks about just the training and you don't speak about, let's say you train 2 hours a day, there's 24 hours in your day, and you're not talking about recovery, you're not talking about sleep practices, and I mean the psychology part, because there's a lot of pressures when you are an athlete, that you end up getting a player that is injured very often, that's not managing the amount. They're doing sometimes the things that they're not supposed to be doing that can affect their performance. So when I entered into the system, I had all these grand ideas of what I wanted to do. But after meeting with a few of the individuals prior to any camp, I started realizing their nutrition knowledge is somewhat there. It's the application that's the problem.
Basic.
So a lot of people know what they're supposed to be doing, they just don't do it. And some people have a rough idea, but they don't truly know it too well to have confidence in applying it. And so the first year, which 2019, the detail around just adapting to individuals, that was going to be really difficult because I literally joined in May and we went into camp in June and there wasn't much time. So, and
Yeah.
it's not about a once-off consultation, it's learning and building, just like in Canada with the systems in
It's evolving.
sports. You evolve as you grow older. Your nutrition is really like that. You have to set a foundation and then you build onto that until you get to the elite personalized nutrition. And it really comes down to habits and formulating that and making something easy, exciting, and accessible. And for me, when I joined in, I mean, I'm sure you saw in the video, it was probably the one where we were in Rugby Championship, and this was just before the World Cup. The goal for me was to introduce the recovery nutrition principles, which was you would shout out at training to the guys, step one, rehydrate with fluid. I mean, I did it with all the teams, but I would literally, like a crazy person, shout out because you don't really get a lot of one-on-one time. You don't get time to do presentations. After train, any opportunity you have to get nutrition education in, you have to adapt. So I used to shout out, step one, rehydrate with fluid. Step two, refuel with carbohydrates. And I would say to them, you cannot go for step three without step two, because with rugby players, they assume, and also with the general public, they assume I just need to eat protein, 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 and I'm going to get results. But it's proven that the combination of carbohydrates with protein after your sport enhances muscle synthesis, so the creation of muscle. And this was basically how I would educate them, taught them in steps. And eventually, when they got so used to the steps and knowing what it meant, it was adding the layers on. So saying to them, you cannot just have one banana. You need to have this and this and this. And I would give them options to make it exciting. So I would say, you either have this or you have that. And they would come to me, okay, so what should I do? And then I'm like, what step are you on? And they would show me sometimes, okay, I've got sometimes they would choose whatever the isotonic was. If we were abroad, Powerade or Lucozade. If we were in South Africa at that time, it was Energade, or it would just simply be water. And if they chose water alone, then there was no carbohydrates, and they had to be choosing carb options from a table. So I would be like a little. I mean, we have a coach. He would call me. Babes on my carbs. So I would say the carbs, because I had a table full of carbs, but I also had a table of, like, they were layered. So the rehydration, the carbohydrates, and the protein. So they saw that you couldn't just take one thing. There was a process. And then sometimes, I mean, it's not always possible to eat something. And this is the conversations you have with the players at a mealtime. You just sit around, and some of them would say, I'm not feeling hungry after training, but I'm eating now. Or I don't want to, you think it's a good idea for me to skip dinner and not have this? And that's where the conversation comes out. And it wasn't something that it could happen in 1 year. It was a continuous journey. And remember, before me, there was no dietitian that was touring with them. So there may have been maybe exposures through dietitians doing a consultancy route and maybe coming to do a talk or being a little bit visible,
but not somebody there for them all the time.
And consistency is really important. So you have to get someone to adopt a behavior and consistently apply it for them to get results. And that's why check-ins are really important. So, I mean, it was really, when they did that video, was just the beginning of something. It evolved, and eventually we got to the World Cup. In the World Cup, it was I realized they'd rather drink something than eat. So would give them recovery smoothies. So it's really, and that's not just for that team. I mean, other teams, have different athletes with different preferences, and you adapt your recovery
Yeah.
nutrition to an individual. And eventually, there are some that you have a specific goal with, and you know they are evolving a little bit quicker than the next person, so you can advise them a little bit differently. And again, there might be some that don't tolerate something, so you adjust. So it's not like you say a one size fits all. But when you're introducing a new behavior, you just have to get started with the basics, and you can
Some.
refine
Yeah.
later on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I saw the Instagram post of Cheslan Kobe thanking you for introducing these practices into his day, and then just allowed him to then become the athlete that he became. And like you said, you were there for them constantly. It's not like something they had to go away from after the session, or maybe on a private consultation. You were there for them. I think that's the important part. So on behalf of South Africa, I thank you for being there for them, for giving our athletes the best opportunity to win not one but two World Cups. So yeah, those kind of contributions are, they don't go, they're unmatched. You can't really take that for granted, and you've done an amazing job. And I think what you've now laid foundations for going forward is going to be so impactful, and for the next generation of athletes coming through, not just SA Rugby, but for all our athletes coming through. I know we haven't touched much about the journey. For a little bit, I just want to touch on, like, when you were called up or when you were capped to be in that environment, how did that feel?
I would say at that time I was 27 and I was very young. And it was also the first time that I was working with a professional team. And it was also quite daunting because you have to remember when you are a young person and you are also not somebody that's been in the setups. I mean, I didn't get an opportunity to work at the unions. So you're an entirely new person. It's not someone where you saw when you were at your franchise and you were playing rugby. It's completely new. And there was, of course, a lot of people that at first they're apprehensive and they're shy. And even to get management to buy into nutrition, there was a lot of groundwork that needed to be done. But I mean, I still remember there was once a time where I said, if there's nutrition related queries, don't ask anyone else but me. And this is because I wanted to foster trust. And that's ultimately how dietitians are able to do what we are doing. You have to trust somebody enough. I mean, with them, some of them are millionaires, of high earning athletes. What they put
Yeah.
into their bodies matters. You really have to win somebody over in terms of really knowing your stuff, but also oftentimes it doesn't mean if I'm there just talking about nutrition. It's building a rapport, building a trusting relationship where somebody can say, okay, you're not just going to be policing me or military
Yeah.
style. If I am truly struggling with something, like I am extremely exhausted all the time, or I'm not sleeping well, it could be something that I can go and speak to the dietitian about. If, for example, my performance is really not doing well, a lot of the times, even when it comes to an injury, rugby players don't like to be completely honest, and because they want to be
Okay.
selected. And even, I mean, I
Yeah.
notice it even now with my younger athletes, they will hide certain things. You have to build a relationship where they know they can trust you
Yeah.
and you can advise them. So at first it was really daunting, but there were key individuals that I identified. Obviously, observation is really important. You you
Yeah.
pick out, you don't need to win everybody over. You pick out the ones that naturally they could be a spokesperson on your part. So they willing, if you win over the right people, they are younger people that look up to those ones and they
Yeah.
start to copy. They will do something because they see somebody else doing it.
Yeah.
And that's
We go
really
back to the
how it.
social media.
Yes,
We go back
exactly.
to that discussion of the influence. So what you've done
Yes.
is you basically identified an influencer that will have a positive impact. So,
And I mean, it really did happen. They were key individuals that they were the ones you spent a lot of time on, because if you try to expend your time with everybody trying to convince everybody, you don't really get
yeah,
progress. But there are certain people that really do understand what nutrition can do for them. And once it starts giving them better results, then you've got this knock on effect. And it's also about identifying the low hanging fruit. I mean, I could be someone that comes with extremely scientific, difficult things, and I would lose them completely. So it was really getting
yeah,
them to apply small changes that will make a massive impact. And a lot of the time, it wasn't. I mean, I used to have sessions 15 minutes before a goal review, which is at the end of the day, the coaches get together with the team and the management and they discuss the day. And I would literally go to the coach and be like, "Can I have 5 minutes to talk about this?" And he was great. He would always welcome it. And or sometimes he would say, "Okay, we're gonna do this first, and then you're gonna come in." And it was really building on that, but I had the collaboration, and it came back to you needed to build trust not only with athletes, but the individuals who support you, who can really progress what you're doing. And it also came down to the doctor, right? Because you have to be somebody that works in a multidisciplinary team. And even
yeah,
now that I am in my private practice, I still do not work in silos. I work with conditioning coaches. I get my clients to, if they're coming for injury nutrition management, get my clients to share their things with their physios so that we can keep this open discussion, because it's not always
yeah.
just about one person, it's a group and how you can influence in different ways. So yeah, I could say that, 2019, 2020, obviously because of COVID, so many things evolve and adapt, and your approach and handling each year, I would say, each
Yeah,
season changes, because you've got changing individuals, you've got changing goals from the coaches, for example. So that was really, for me, it was quite daunting being a young person coming into that environment, you know but I knew already then, as long as you stay true to what my messaging was and got the right people involved, it would have a knock-on effect. And yeah, then 5 years later, I mean,
that's
definitely
amazing.
definitely did. And I mean, they're not the only team that
I
I've
mean,
worked with. A lot of people forget that I
okay.
I didn't I didn't get appointed as
Yeah,
just Springboks dietitian, and I was very very fortunate that last year I got the chance to work with female athletes, because this is where
okay.
there's a large progression towards, and the literature around female nutrition is just growing, and it's amazing. And I got a chance to be involved with also the female athletes, and it was the same thing when I entered with them. Even though I was older, it's still quite daunting
Yeah,
being
yeah. Your basis is there. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. You have your basis of how you want to approach things, and y- yeah, like you said, you have your foundation, but you can evolve that foundation. But the basic
Yes.
principles are there for anybody. Yeah, that's good. I mean, we don't. I'm sure. I'm just gonna focus on the World Cup run. The pressure, not just from an athlete to perform. I mean, the backroom staff also have that pressures as well. How did you
Mhm.
feel? Did you feel any kind of pressure? Did you feel any kind of yeah? Did you feel that kind of pressure that was also for you to contribute to get them to that level where they can be successful?
Oh, definitely. And the pressure is heightened when you have individuals that don't necessarily want to be supportive of your approaches. I think
Mm.
for certain, obviously different regions you go to, you really need to know the food provision staff. So, like your food and beverage manager, the chefs involved. You have to know the banqueting manager. There's a lot of individuals that you get introduced to, and it's not just about
Yeah,
showing up on that day and getting to know them. I think 2019 was pretty amazing for me because I got that early exposure even before. I got an opportunity to meet with hotel staff before we arrived. Wasn't the case with 2023. I mean, luckily there were times where we already went to certain places prior to 2023 with the team. So you got to meet individuals who were decision makers and you already got their contacts and you didn't need to wait for a team manager or you didn't need to wait for somebody
Yeah.
to introduce you. They would actually reach out to you, which, you know, World Rugby didn't want to happen. But that pressure comes in
Why is that?
when it's not you alone doing your job. There are other people that can
What?
influence your job. And I mean, it can
Okay.
really be overwhelming if you don't have that interworking uh, communication and a relationship.
Relationship,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think also people forget that it's not just about the players. Management also gets quite a bit of pressure as well because you love your job and you love what you do.
Yeah.
So it just takes one person to say, this pre-match meal was not up to standard and threw me off my routine. For you to feel frazzled. I know it actually happened to me.
Yeah.
I won't say who, but like in 2019 when we lost against New Zealand, there was a player that came up to
Hmm.
me and said, because they stuffed up
Oh
the
no.
spaghetti bolognese for the game, I didn't eat a pre-match meal. And I felt so crap coming
Wow.
into the game. It ruined my entire mood for the game and I felt and I played crap. But when he said
Yeah.
that, you immediately think it's my fault. But it's not actually your
My
fault.
fault.
How
Yeah.
can one
Responsible.
thing really
Exactly.
have such a major issue? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, I mean, you definitely,
Yeah.
I mean, that's your area. It's your baby. You got to look after it. And yeah, maybe
Yeah.
you can adapt. I don't know. But in that moment, you feel pressure because it's your area. You got to look after it. So, especially in knockout stages. I mean, for me, I learned not to change too many things. The match day, the match day fueling was the very same from 2019 right through until my last game with the Springboks, which was the World Cup 2023. It never changed um, because that was based on the preference of the team at that time. Because a lot of the players still stayed, and it was
Mm.
also what
Yeah.
worked for them. But it's not to say that there are other dietitians that are now in the space. I mean, it's not to say if they come with a different intervention that that's not the wrong intervention. That's what worked for them. But there's this pressure that even though you have
Yeah.
this one set plan, you're not the one preparing the meals. You have to be very trusting, and of course, I mean, you know that if the team gets knocked out, you go home as well. So you
As well. Yeah.
feel this pressure to also want to succeed, and
Perform.
you sacrifice so much, you dedicate so much hours to your work. You feel the pressure of on game day where you've done everything you could. Now it's entirely up to the players, and coaches also feel the same. They've done everything that they could. It's up to the players. So it's like handing over this, and they have this massive responsibility.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast. It only takes a second, but it makes a huge difference and helps the channel grow. Your support means the world.
But
Basically, what I was saying, there's definitely a pressure that, and I mean, but the pressure also comes from how much you care.
yes.
Obviously, the more you care, the more you put into something, you feel this weight on you, and you just don't want to disappoint. You don't want to not do what you envisioned, especially because you want to give your best to help them
Mm.
do their best. So even though sometimes maybe athletes may not recognize it, but each person plays a role to help put them up for success, to make sure that what the goal is on that Saturday or Sunday because of the World
Whenever.
Cup,
Yeah.
some games on Sunday, yeah, that you have done everything you need to from a different areas. And it really comes out in sport, that's really how it is. It's all this preparation for this one day that's like, it's
Yeah.
massive.
That's the thing, right?
Mm. That's why it's
People think it's
continuous.
just a one day.
Yeah, it's about all these other days that they build up into the one day. And then after you win, it starts again. And even
Yes.
with camps, like after that tournament, then you have your break, you come back into camp and it's a restart. So it's a really high pressure environment. Um, it's something that if you don't take care of yourself, then you won't be able to do the best of your ability as well. But it's also really important. What I've learned is that you have to have some people in your environment that help you during those, because really, when you're in high pressure environments, you cannot do it on your own. You simply
No.
can't just take on this load on your own. You have to have someone that you can talk to, somebody you can vent to, somebody that will help lift your load, because you will not be able to survive. And I think that's really what I also appreciate with some of the coaches that I've gotten to work with across all the teams, is that they also understand that different individuals are helping in whichever way in order
Yeah.
to alleviate pressures off of them as well. Because can you imagine if there was not, as an example, if there was not a physio to strap, or there was only one physio doing
Oh,
an
yeah, yeah,
entire
yeah,
team,
yeah.
then when it comes time
It'd
to
be
a team
crazy.
meeting, players are still strapping, things don't go as they should. Even someone as simple as a a logistics manager or kit manager. Well, it's not a simple thing, it's actually quite a lot of work, but they make sure that certain pressures are taken off other individuals. And it's only when you really become, I would say, big picture thinking that you realize this. And even as a normal individual throughout the day, I mean, if I think of myself, with starting my business now, you have to do a lot on your own, but it really helps when you've got somebody who lifts off whatever, because it takes off the pressure of a day. So it's the same
Exactly.
thing in a
Yeah.
team setting. Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah,
asking for
for sure.
help is really important. When I first stepped
Yeah.
in, you're young
It's a
and you're like
difficult
so
one most
scared.
people struggle with.
And then you get to a point where you just have to. And sometimes people ask you, do you want help? And immediately you're thinking, if I say yes to this, are they going to
Hmm.
think that I cannot do this? But
Yeah.
actually, the fact that they offer it, it's a big thing for you to say, yes, can you assist? Because delegating tasks are also really important. Otherwise, you might not get the best or you might not aim for you might not get what you're aiming for in terms of results or your expectations, just because you couldn't
Yeah.
delegate certain things out. So, I mean, a classic example, the night before a game, we have a pre-bed snack an hour before they are meant to go to bed. It is for the purpose of giving them enough nutrition to fill their tank. So the coaches would always say on game day, you empty your tank. And I capitalized over that thinking. And I said, okay, well, nutrition is about filling the tank. It's giving you the energy. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
literature proven, the nighttime snack assists with recovery if it's got casein, leucine. So that was really getting them to have that, because that's what the science is. But they really enjoyed smoothies. So it was getting them to have a smoothie 9 o'clock in the evening before they were intended to go to bed.
Bed.
And
Yeah.
what they enjoyed. But I couldn't always, because you're preparing for the next day, you are sorting out what you need to take with. There's so much. So there were players that would actually step in, and they would be the one that it was a proud moment for them to make the smoothie for the playing
Smoothie.
squad, the guys that pitched, you know. And if the guys gave them compliments, it fueled their ego and they felt good. And if they've played really well the next day, guys literally went up to that guy and they would say, I mean, it was Billy that used to make the
Thank you,
smoothies.
mate.
Would
Yeah.
go to Billy and say like, I played so well, Billy, because it was your smoothie. And then
Good.
it like hypes him up. And then, or when it tastes really good. So it's something that you don't
Yeah.
realize that, well, they're helping you lift a load. It's also helping them in another way to maybe feel less of a pressure in a
Oh, yeah.
different way.
Team camaraderie
Yeah.
is important. You have to be on this. Everyone has to be on the same page to succeed. Because if one string is out of place, it derails everything. Like you said, because previously, if you're not doing your job, it affects not just the players, but it affects also the backroom staff because they also need the energy to do their job. So it's not just you're looking after the players, you're looking after yourself and you're looking after the players. How did you take care of yourself away from the pressure? How did you make sure that your cup was full?
I will say 2019, I was very fit then. I mean, that was like my era of running 4 minutes 20 a kilometer. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I would be that person that would wake up super early and go and train. And that was my way of coping with the stress. But then
Yeah.
eventually, I mean, your time or your days become so long that you can't wake up to go and train that time. If you don't train that time, your days are so long, you probably only get around to 10 o'clock in the evening training, so you don't get around to training. And it was actually because of yoga that I always partook in yoga since varsity, watching it on YouTube and just really going to classes, joining in on classes. But that setting, I always used to carry a yoga mat with me to whichever place we were traveling to. I even bought a Lululemon foldable yoga mat. Like it's one of those
Yeah.
portable ones that fits into
Yeah.
little backpack because it's like
Backpack.
tiny. Yeah. So I mean, yoga for me was that thing, just to keep moving, because obviously movement allows for you to have better stress management. And sometimes it wasn't always possible for me to do training or to go for runs. I mean, there was a time I used to run with one of the management members, and it was really, that was exciting. A lot of the management members actually would go for runs, and
Yeah.
not everybody, but I mean, it was either keeping moving, and then on the off day, I made it a thing since 2019. Actually, I'm a person that I can be very sociable and I talk a lot and I'm very friendly, but I have my moments where I actually just want to be in silence and I want to be alone. And in the team setting, because you are around so many people, it's literally between 55 to 60 people in a day and onwards, because there's different people, you tend to get drained. So for me, it was stepping aside to have me time to not be bothered, just literally be on my own. I would go on an off day, which sometimes it's the day before captain's run. Captain's run is the day before a game. So that would sometimes be on a Thursday, or if we played on a different day, it would be,
Sunday. Yeah.
2 days before. Yeah. So it was setting out what I needed to do. And from about 11 in the morning until when we needed to come back, getting away from the hotel
The
setting
environment. Yeah.
to refresh. It would literally be walking around. I remember once, Japan is very, very safe. And I'm going to refer to 2019 a lot because there were so many learning curves then.
Yeah.
And for me, that personally, that was because it was my first time, it was a very fulfilling and enriching period because I got to learn so much and experience
Yes.
something is for the first time. But I was remember in Japan and I was roaming on my own on an off day and I bumped into people and they said, "You shouldn't be." Actually, it was even though we weren't in Japan. At first, we were in New Zealand when it happened. And I said, "Oh, God, I'm heading back to the hotel now, so it's fine." Then the second time was in Japan, and they said, "You shouldn't be doing this every time going on your own." And I actually went to this robot show. And and then one of the players said to me, "Stop hanging out on your own, because if something happens to you, what then will everybody do? Because nobody knows if you are okay."
Exactly.
And it was
Yeah.
really my way to say, they would say, "Go with somebody." But for me,
It's
that's
that South
how I
African
re
mindset, right?
yeah, yes, how I
Yeah. It's that
recharged
over
was
your
really
shoulder.
being
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, prior to prior to touring with the teams, I wasn't I wasn't somebody that didn't travel before. I had traveled many a times on my own. I actually went to Europe for 3 weeks on my own as a solo traveler, and it wasn't something that I was new to. Or, I mean, again, I'm from Joburg originally, so we are very aware of our
Oh
surroundings, and
yeah,
we're not going to be
our
reckless
surroundings.
things. We're not going to be
Yeah,
walking with our phone just out to become targets, right? Because
or
it's like
jewelry or
ingrained into.
something that's
Yeah,
flashy. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and you also, if you want a photo, you suss out the person. So, I mean, I was somebody that I like to either do yoga or movement to manage, the pressure, the
nice.
environment, and then to know that I like isolation. So I will want to do things on my own. And even though I'm sometimes sociable or I'm outgoing, I can also be somebody
Mhm.
that chooses to, especially I would be the most isolated and bedrocked on the off days where I was very overwhelmed. And I would just simply not
Yeah,
even leave the room just because you just need time to energize. And the other way was family. Like for me, family is absolutely important. And when you are away from family, you start to realize how important family is. So it's almost that thing of
yeah,
out of sight, out of mind, the opposite of it, that absence makes the heart grow fonder. And when we're on tour, you are touring with the team for several weeks at a time away from your loved ones, working extremely
hmm
long hours. And even when you're on your off time, maybe you're working on other things. So you really need to touch base with people that can show you love and show you care and appreciate you and remind you of things beyond just a title or just a job role.
you,
And
yeah,
yeah, just and then obviously for me personally, always I might not be somebody who always reads 5 times prayers, but when I joined the team, the morning prayer, Fajr, was something that I always did. And it was really important to me because obviously sometimes you are off the gym, back at the hotel for lunch, or off the units back at the hotel for lunch, and then it's training again or meeting training, and there's not a lot of time to fit in other prayers. So at least I knew I had that. And
yeah,
obviously the Friday prayer. It was really important that even
mm,
there were times we would get back from a captain's run and I would go straight to my room. I would sometimes check on the lunch, or sometimes straight to the room, and players understood. There were players that were at first confused about it, like, where's he? And others would say, it's Friday, she has to go and pray. And it's that
sense,
tolerance and
yes,
understanding. So for me, I think those would be the non negotiables for any person if they are in a high pressure environment. Is that you have to keep moving, you have to find whichever way helps you energize, maybe if that's being around loved ones or being on your own, not getting overstimulated like in my circumstance, or it may be checking in with family and always having faith because faith is going to ground you. And
yeah,
those were my coping mechanisms.
amazing. Yeah, you've touched on a point there of faith and having a practice that brings you back to reality or brings you grounded or grounds you basically, because then you have something that helps you balance again. Because both of our cultures and faiths, we were introduced to prayer and a sense of culture very early on. I think from birth, basically. So it's just something
Mm,
like we do in Hindu homes is we have our light. We light the lamp in the morning before we leave home. It's just to protect ourselves for the day. But sometimes you forget. Yeah, when you're in certain environments, you don't really do it all the time. But you have the fundamentals. Even if you go away, like when we're traveling as well, when we go away, now it's like a staple thing that we do when we give thanks when every time we have a meal. It's like something subconsciously that we started doing. Now it's part of our practice, daily practice. This is something that when you feel that you don't do it, something is missing. It's
mhm,
just about giving thanks to, thank you God for for giving us this beautiful meal. Thank you for the hands that prepared this meal for us, for nourishing our bodies. And you're just giving the universe the opportunity to say that you are thankful for what you have right now, and you don't take it for granted for what we have. And we could,
I do.
like in your environment or in your position, you could have easily taken it for granted and stood on a high level and not actually then go back to your practices because you felt okay. Because it does happen. We do tend mentally we do tend to think now we're better than others, and that's where fundamentally I'm trying to understand certain people in our life right now. But I know myself that will never be the case because I knew where I came from. The roots were very much embedded into us, that you have to be thankful, you have to be grateful, humble, and you have to be you treat everybody the same way you would want to be treated.
I do agree. I also think that a grateful heart will never be an unhappy, bitter heart. So I do think that, for example, if I were in that space and I was ungrateful or I was not cognizant of all the opportunities that I had, I don't think that I would have been, for me, the type of person that could be so resilient. And of course, I've been through, even before SA Rugby, I've been through a lot of rejection, a lot of negativity. People always will have something to say about you, but I don't think I've ever been in the situation where where a grateful person has said something negative about me, or where a grateful person has been nasty towards me. I always noticed, and it comes back to experiences and exposures with people that are grateful for what they have in their lives and whatever is meant for them and is written for them and comes to them, and understand, you do what you can as best as you can, and the rest is up to God. Whichever religion you are, when you have that gratefulness and that understanding, you never look at another person with an envious heart and say, oh, but if I had gotten that, oh, but if I
Exactly.
were there, or oh, but why did that person get that? What makes that person so great? Because that means that you are overlooking what you have to be grateful for. People don't always know
Yeah.
everyone's journeys or stories,
Story.
don't truly understand them, and they tend to get so negative. But when you're grateful, you don't want to think negative of other people. You don't want to say bad things about them. So I also feel that if it's not only about treating other people as you would like them to be treated, but also to remember that whatever happens to you in your life journey happens as it's meant to happen. And I mean, it comes back to like when you were saying you wanted to go and represent your country and it maybe didn't happen, but they were learning experiences that you had. And
Yes.
if you're grateful for those learning experiences, the quality of your life is so much better. Sometimes you don't go through great things in life and you experience turmoil, but you are grateful you overcame it and you learn from it. And that's really how I see things. That it also comes back to rooting yourself in gratitude, because I also, for me, culturally, if you're grateful, you get more.
Yes.
And that's
You are
how, and
rewarded.
blessings are not just monetary, right? Blessings can
Yeah.
come from so many different areas.
Exactly.
So I think from a
Yeah.
mental
There
space
was.
as well, a gratitude journal is really like important. That the times when you, and this is something that it's becoming very popular now, but when I was in varsity, um, a person introduced me to it as a form of, I think it's called psychosocial, and there must be a word for it, but it's basically
Yeah.
like therapy where you don't need to take medication. You're literally just journaling. And this was, for the time of 2012, you to talk about journaling then, and it wasn't really like a big thing So
Yeah.
being grateful and literally writing down 5 things that you are grateful for each day, and it can change. It can be like at the end of the day, and your inclination to want to be bitter towards somebody becomes less, because you don't need to worry about the next person's personal life or what's going
Correct.
on with
Yeah.
them. You are so grateful for what's in your life and what's happening with you, that you are able to overcome your own things, and you're not bothered by, maybe gossip of other things or talk of the wrong things. And it really comes down to, it's so good for you mentally when you practice certain things, like having gratitude, like being able to ground yourself with, even if, like you say, with Hinduism, lighting your light, because it's something that you've always done since you were a kid, you were brought up with, and going back to those roots. And I mean, it's beyond that. It can be literally something as being forgiving for yourself, or, sometimes you're in a high pressured environment and you just want to
Yeah.
take the time to yourself and not feel guilty for doing something for yourself. So, I mean, that's
For
really
sure.
something that a lot of people need to practice on or focus on. And it's something that I
Yeah.
definitely do. Yeah.
Advise. Yeah. Zeenat, before we wrap up, yeah, the next phase of your journey is now into private practice. Anything we can look forward to? How can people get in touch with you if they're looking for a dietitian? Anything that you can share with us?
So I would like to share that my choice to go into private practice again was to become more accessible to active individuals. And sports nutrition is something that's very special to me. But I've also, I mean, you've probably heard during this conversation how I feel about lifestyle and well-being. And this is why I also have chosen corporate wellness. And it's something that I've had an experience even before working full-time in sports, where I've also worked in a corporate setting, and I understand a high pressure environment. I understand when you go into a
Yeah.
corporate, how sometimes your job or your role can influence your health. And those are two areas, like I said, movement and well-being is really important to me. So I chose to go into private practice to be more accessible to those individuals who want to do better for themselves and want to invest in living out their full potential by learning, getting the access to the right individuals. And it's also prompted me to not only do one-on-one consults, I do group talks. I collaborate with gyms and different companies. I also do webinars regularly in person and online. Obviously, corporate wellness, so working with HR in terms of their employee wellness and getting access to nutrition. And so corporate nutrition is one of my areas. And for those that are interested in all the services that I do offer, they can go to my website, www.zeenatsimjee.com, and they can also make contact with me through my website. But it was really a wonderful experience coming onto your podcast, Shin, and I really
Thank you.
enjoyed it. Having to talk about, our experiences and our exposures. And yeah, I really hope that the listeners and those that engage with it can offer their insights and their thoughts on what they thought about it, and reach out, of course, if they need a dietitian, especially those that are active, that perhaps are still weighing or don't really understand their nutrition. And my role is really to help people elevate to their higher or better level, and better than they were last year or today, or
Yeah.
where they were
Correct.
in the past. So thank you so much, Kishin.
Yeah. You're welcome. And I will also leave the links to Zeenat's website and her socials below, so check her out. I think you've taken my sentence next to comment and share their thoughts. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. But no, guys, Thank you so much, Zeenat. Zeenat has just shown us what a true game changer in every sense she is, from fueling elite athletes to breaking down doors for the next generation. Her impact goes far beyond sport. If this conversation moved you, share it with somebody who wants to hear it. And guys, until the next one, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. You'll just help it grow and bring you more inspirational people like Zeenat. And until the next one, guys, stay Zen. Thank you so much.